Good morning, everyone, and welcome to this episode of Teaching for Sustainability. And today we're joined by Dr. Alison Kitson and Dr. Michael Riley from UCL's Centre for Climate Change and Sustainability Education. Hello.
Hello,
Hi.
nice to be here.
Alison, Michael, I was going to say, first of all, would you like to sort of introduce yourselves a bit more, your roles, and maybe a little bit of kind of how your journey in terms of how you got to where you are, right? Alison, did you want to start?
Sure, yes. Well, I began my career as a history teacher in secondary schools, and a job that I really loved. And then after quite a few years of doing that, I moved into teacher education, and that's effectively where I've been ever since in various roles. So I'm really interested and passionate about supporting teachers, understanding what teachers want and need to develop, and then helping to provide that. And I guess it was about 10 years ago I started to think more seriously about education as a response to the climate crisis and the nature crisis. Initially through my work in history education, and then that kind of broadened out about thinking about the whole curriculum. So my work in the centre brings all my different interests together, really. My interest in responding to the climate crisis, but also my interest in supporting teachers. So it's kind of perfect role for me.
And Michael, yourself?
Thank you. Well, ditto, really. I started life as a secondary history teacher. I was a local authority advisor in Somerset for history and geography, and then moved into initial teacher education. And for a while was director of the school's history project. And I've always really been interested in environmental history. My PhD's in an aspect of the historic environment, and and so when Alison and our colleague Nicola Walsh set up the Centre for Climate Change and Sustainability Education at UCL, I was really, really pleased to become part of it in helping Alison to develop the professional development modules.
And Alison, did you just want to mention about the centre? It's how many years old now? Is it 3 or 4?
We launched in April 2022,
Hmm.
so we're almost 4 years old. So it's been a really busy 4 years.
And the
Um,
aims of the centre, sorry, what's the sort of the goals and mission of the centre?
yeah, so we're very much focused on school age children. So up to the age of 18, that's our primary demographic, if you like, in terms of education. But we very much see our role as supporting the people that teach those students. So we, effectively will want to play our part in improving education about the climate and nature crisis for young people and help them develop a sense of what they can do about it.
I guess that transitions well then into the reason we're here today is to talk about the Teaching for Sustainable Futures. I guess I don't want to call it a course or a kind of module because actually it's something far more encompassing. And I guess, yeah, would you like to share a little bit more about what that involves and who it's for?
Yeah, sure. Well, we call it a program, really. It's a professional development program, and this is the professional development program that's part of the Centre for Climate Change and Sustainability Education at UCL, and it's an online program of 1 hour modules, and these are aimed at primary and secondary teachers. And as Alison said, the modules are intended to help teachers to embed issues of climate change, of nature, and of sustainability into the curriculum and into their teaching. And each of the modules is based on accepted good practice in professional development for teachers. You know, they build deep subject knowledge, both in relation to issues around climate change and biodiversity and sustainability. But at the same time, we believe the modules really deepen subject knowledge in relation to individual disciplines. And each one provides really powerful resources that teachers can use sometimes in the classroom. Some of the powerful resources are aimed at the teachers themselves. Others can be adapted and used in classrooms. And they provide teaching strategies too for teachers. So we're trying to develop powerful pedagogy around teaching around sustainability. So each module kind of combines principles and resources and approaches that teachers can adapt for their own context. So they're very clear, but kind of flexible and transferable to different contexts in primary and secondary schools.
I'm just looking at the site now, and it's what I really appreciate is the language and terminology that you use and the way it's presented. It's a really accessible website with the images, and then quite clearly the age and the subject, and then using language like where to start or going deeper. And I think that actually it's a really good steer for teachers. Was that quite purposeful, sorry?
Yeah, I mean, just smiling because Michael will remember, we've really thought hard about what we call these, and actually we didn't start off by calling them those things. So that has kind of evolved, partly as we've had feedback from teachers, and partly we've understood that it's got to be super user friendly.
Mhm.
I mean, one of the things that we're acutely aware of is that teachers don't have huge amounts of time. Schools don't have huge amounts of money, so anything that's going to have serious impact, we think needs to be free, and these are free. That's really important to say. But we also try and be really efficient in our use of time. So the where to start modules, it's exactly what it says. So if you're doing a module on where to start in, I don't know, secondary English or primary mathematics, it is literally that. It's an hour of lots of ideas, inspiration, resources about literally where to start if you want to embed issues of climate change and nature in that subject area and phase. Going deeper is exactly what it says. So it goes deeper into a specific topic. So, for example, in primary geography, it's weather and climate. In secondary history, it's the Industrial Revolution. So we take a specific topic. And we also have a module type called Making Connections. That's a kind of newer direction for us, and Michael will talk a little bit more about one of those later. And that's where we bring subjects together. So we're thinking more interdisciplinary with those. So yeah, I'm glad it looks inviting. The website also was quite a lot of work to make it look as kind of streamlined as possible. So we hope it's really, really easy. And teachers can literally go onto the website and click on a module, and all they need to do is put in their name and email address, and they're in. So it's super easy. It's like 30 seconds.
Just to go back as well on that point, you were talking about that understanding teachers limited time, and I think that's a really interesting point in that we obviously feel like this is a fundamental element to teaching and something that every teacher needs to engage with, but we're still in that situation where actually there's so many other pressures on their time, and this is seen as sort of one element of, and I think that's an interesting juggle that we're having to navigate.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
I think it's
sorry.
probably worth saying that at the moment, let me think, Alison, what modules are up there? At the moment, teachers can access, we've got English, maths, history, geography, music, PSHE, citizenship, and primary science. So
Yeah.
teachers can access all these modules at the moment. And then by September, we should have a full suite of modules for both primary and secondary teachers. So these will be the where to start modules for each subject in primary and secondary. And then we'll be adding more going deeper modules during the next academic year. Yeah.
I guess then it's taking a slight tangent in terms of then once teachers, and we're going to explore these in a bit more in a moment, but once teachers have gone through this, what kind of outcomes are you hoping for? What are sort of the planned impact?
Well, we think about this in terms of impact on teachers and then impact on the children who are taught by those teachers. So the impact on teachers, I think the number one, Michael, I don't know whether you agree with this, but for me, the number one outcome for teachers is that they feel inspired, to embed some of the ideas in our modules. They probably won't want to embed all of them, but they can choose which of the ideas and approaches they want to embed, and that they feel inspired and excited by that. I mean, it's worth saying that we're dealing with some serious issues here, and we don't avoid those. But by the same token, we're trying to enrich the subject as well and make the subject meaningful and relevant. And actually, I think there's quite a lot in the modules that's genuinely quite joyful as well.
Mm.
There's a lot of nature connection in there. There's a lot of showcasing the amazing sustainability related work that's going on, and the collaborations that's bringing that about. So I think that there's what we might call constructive optimism in there, and there is genuine joy. So I really hope teachers feel inspired and certainly feel more confident to embed these issues, and they don't have to throw their schemes of work out of the window. We all know there's curriculum change around the corner, and no one's going to want to kind of start from scratch with all those schemes of work. But there's lots of ways in which we're showcasing how to integrate these issues in quite light touch ways. I mean, there are also examples of where you could actually plan some new sequences of lessons if you want to, but you don't have to do that. There's kind of different levels at which you can engage with this. So I think for teachers, that's really what we're looking for: building their confidence and inspiring them,
Mm.
and also, encouraging them to adapt the approaches and the resources. And we feature lots of case studies from schools, but we don't necessarily expect that teachers will want to take that kind of case study and apply it exactly. Well, they might, but they're teaching in a different school with different children in a different locality. So we hope they also have the confidence to make some adaptations. And again, Michael will talk about that in relation to our Living Cities module a bit later. I mean, for young people themselves, I mean, you won't be surprised by any of this, Paul, because it's all the things that I know you would agree with. But we want young people to develop a connection with the natural world, to understand how the earth is interconnected, to develop empathy for those who are unfairly or inequitably and disproportionately affected by climate change, to be skeptical about some of the claims made about climate change, to be alert to mis and disinformation. And I guess, fundamentally to feel that there's things they can do about the crises that we're facing. And that's a principle we really stick with. So that's really why we call it Teaching for Sustainable Futures. We want this to be futures focused.
Yeah, we've sort of skirted around the idea that this has previously been called sort of education for sustainable development, and that there's been a shift in that terminology and language, which I think is actually quite fundamental.
Yeah.
I was going to just also nod back to the teacher piece there, because I think there's lots of similarities with our experience with teachers. Is that this is not, it should not be seen as a bolt-on. This is a way to reflect on people's existing practice and then to reinvigorate it. And we've seen in a lot of schools that actually using the climate nature crisis as a medium or a vehicle to be able to reflect on curriculum more broadly can have a really positive knock-on impact more widely in terms of teachers and their sort of well-being and sense of their own practice, but also wider outcomes. If you think more traditionally about literacy or numeracy or whatever it might be, that actually this is a vehicle to be able to sort of reinvigorate all of that. And I
Yeah,
think, sorry,
totally agree.
I
Yeah.
was also going to say just also that sense of you talked a little bit around the necessity for teachers' autonomy and their professional kind of practice and experience, and that being a lens in which to sort of mediate this. And I think also so many of the teachers that we connect with, this is necessary for them to stay in teaching. And I know that can sound quite extreme, but in order for them to sort of feel like they're I guess marrying up these two worlds, the one where they're achieving the curriculum aims and the expectation of their school, but also their understanding of wider what's going on in the world and society. And in order for, I guess people talk about cognitive dissonance, and there's an element of this if people are teaching in a way that ignores this, but to bring those two together can actually help keep people in the profession to a certain degree.
Mm. I
Absolutely.
totally agree. Did you want to come in there, Michael?
Well, yeah, I mean, that's what we really emphasize with our student teachers at the IOE, and I know other institutions do that, and in professional development as well. That's the joy of teaching, isn't it? That creativity is at the heart of it. And as teachers, we never stop learning. So Alison and I have learned a huge amount over the last 3 years about sustainability and about nature, and about climate change. And it's an absolute joy. So that's at the heart of all these modules, really. Just as Alison said, empowering teachers and inspiring teachers and kind of opening up their creativity in curriculum planning. And some of those changes were very much rooted in what's already happening in schools at the moment. They're building on what's there. Other principles and strategies and resources that we share are kind of much more radical and out there. And teachers can kind of take this and build on the modules from where they are really and how they want to take it forward in their own context.
I think it's really interesting that the early career framework course that UCL runs has been encouraging people to engage with our work. And actually, it's been really, really popular with early career teachers and their mentors. And I think that says quite a lot about, teachers starting out in their careers and what really matters to them, and kind of wanting to find that the kind of values piece, I guess, in all of this. So we see the kind of beginning and early career teachers as one of our kind of real target audiences. But I mean, any teacher, of course, is encouraged to engage with these, and it's certainly written with all teachers in mind.
Is this a good moment maybe to jump into one of the modules in more detail?
Yeah. Yeah,
Sure.
sure. I can do it. I mean, each module has a very similar structure, in that generally they begin with a 10-minute introduction, just something to grab teachers' attention, and then three 15-minute sections. So, as Alison said, there are three types of module. We have the where to start module, and we've asked the module developers when they're writing modules to think about the three most important areas that teachers of individual subjects could focus on when in terms of where to start. And I should say that module developers have been commissioned to write the modules, but they've worked with wider advisory groups from their subjects to advise them on the development of these modules. So we're pretty confident that the areas we've identified are have the most potential. So yeah, so each module is divided into kind of after the intro 15-minute sections, and within those sections we provide are really powerful resources. Some of those are aimed at teachers, so they can be interviews, videos, visual sources, and so on. And others can be used right away in the classroom, so they're aimed at students as well. And then we get teachers to engage with these and to reflect on them. So we have an element which we call think, discuss, because we appreciate that some teachers may be engaging with the modules individually and alone, and other teachers may be engaging them with colleagues and therefore have the opportunity to talk about what they've engaged with. And then crucially, at the end of a section, at the end of a module, we have suggestions for what teachers might do to embed these ideas into their own curriculum, to adapt them and embed them into their own context. So that's broadly the structure we've got. So just take a couple of examples. If you take a primary English one, for example. This module highlights the key role that English has to play in not only in helping children to understand issues around environmental change, around sustainability, around nature, around climate change, but also in developing their agency really to speak out and to have their voices heard in relation to climate change. So it's a really rich module in that sense. And so it begins by exploring the language we use in talking about climate change and sustainability. That's the first section, and then the second section is this wonderful, powerful resource where we explore a range of writers and a range of books written for children, inspiring books for children about climate change and environment that teachers might want to bring into their curriculum and develop their reading for children in this way. And then the final section encourages children to speak out on climate change by producing comics. So it's got some great ideas for kind of combining visuals and text in relation to climate change. So yeah, and a completely in a way same format, but contrasting module, as Alison mentioned before, our first interdisciplinary module. So we began at Key Stage 3 by combining geography and history with a focus on what we call living cities. So this is a module. Again, it's in three parts, but it takes kind of different approach really, because it provides a kind of outline inquiry focused on London, exploring the past and the present. So the past is the history bit, the present geography bit, and then the future, where both subjects combined, of nature in London. So it's very much a focus on nature in the urban environment. And then the final section in this module is a case study. So we've worked with a school, Westminster Academy in West London, that have taken this outline inquiry and then applied it to their own context in their own particular patch of London. So yeah, a module that includes a case study. In fact, quite a few of our modules include case studies based on what's already happening, some of the best practice and uh, some of the kind of groundbreaking practice that's already out there in schools.
I think that aspect's really sort of inspirational, motivational, because I think often teachers can sort of turn around and say, well, it's just not possible, or, this
Yeah,
is something you're trying to expect too much. And if you can say to them, no, no, there's this teacher just over there who's doing this, and here's an example, I think that then really
exactly.
can help build that confidence. So,
That's really true. I mean, in the case of living cities, for example, now we've got several schools across the country who, based on the module and based on the example from Westminster Academy, are now doing their own version of living cities in their own particular context. And later this year, we're bringing in, say, IOE to share what they've done, and those examples will then be going into the program. Yeah.
sorry, Alison, were you going to come in on that as well?
Well, just I was just reflecting on well, two things really. Interestingly, I ran a session with some teachers in Hampshire recently, and and of all the modules I was talking to them about, and we were kind of discussing, Living Cities was the one they got most excited about. I think that's really interesting because instantly they saw the potential to create a really local study, because wherever you live, certainly in England, pretty much in the UK, you're near a town or a city, right? So the idea that you could do something about living cities or living towns, you can instantly localize it. And I think schools are pretty excited about that possibility. So that was the first thing I was going to say. The other thing was just Michael's point about featuring case studies in schools. I think probably almost all of them have some kind of case study in school. Either we've gone out to schools and found examples of fantastic things that are going on, or we've developed some resources and then asked schools to pilot them and kind of make them their own. And then we feature interviews with sometimes with the children and often with the teachers. And I think that's a really big selling point for these modules, because we've got teachers on the advisory group
Mhm.
advising on what should go in the modules. We've got teachers featured in the modules. So we very much see this as a kind of collaboration. And actually, what Michael's just said about living cities is a kind of perfect segue into saying our kind of longer term vision is to make these modules increasingly kind of co-created with teachers, if you like.
Mm.
The more that teachers start to do these fantastic, amazing things, the more we want to showcase that in future modules. So I think that's a really exciting opportunity, and we're always happy to hear from teachers who
Yeah.
might have ideas and things they want to
I
share.
think we've talked about this already, haven't we? I think there's something we can do in that cross-fertilization piece of lots of teachers that we are working with, and particularly around our framework and approach that then can kind of, yeah, kind of be mapped in. I also feel like all of these things are so complementary because I can really see how teachers that we work with could use this as a launch pad to sort of deepen their understanding and I guess breadth of kind of what's possible, and then that there's that element of sort of picking and choosing and being inspired by lots of different things that then cross fertilize, because we all know that that's how teachers have always worked, that sort of magpie sense of,
Absolutely.
because you struggle to sort of say this teacher's been impacted by us because they've been impacted by so many things, and the way that they develop their curriculum and their teaching practice is inspired by so many different aspects, and that complexity kind of makes it's a bit of a challenge but also makes it really interesting.
And we're really kind of excited to signpost to other organisations, including the fantastic things that you do, the great things that subject associations are doing, and lots of organisations. We definitely see our modules as one part of that kind of bigger picture. I think what we're doing is quite distinctive. I think what you're doing is quite distinctive. I think everyone is doing different sorts of things. I think it kind of comes together quite nicely. And I think the more we can signpost for teachers, the more we're kind of doing a bit of that legwork for them.
Yeah, and it's that's I think is the key piece, isn't it? Is making and we've already referenced that element of time and sort of energy, but making it as
Mm.
easy and accessible for teachers as possible. And I guess one thing I did want to come back to you, Michael, on that is also it comes across that you are really conscious of elements of the existing curriculum that are entry points. So knowing that every school is teaching in the Industrial Revolution or aspects of geography where there's a way to be able to sort of open it up to the climate and nature crisis and to use that as a lens that they teachers might not at the moment be using, but with a little tweak that can then come in.
That's very true, Paul. Yeah. I mean, if you take history as an example, which is obviously the ones we know best because Alison and I wrote those, we deliberately decided to start with in secondary the Industrial Revolution because we know that nearly all schools teach about that, uh, but maybe not in as powerful a way as it could be. So, in relation to energy, for example, which is the focus of our secondary module. But on the other hand, we've taken a completely different approach in primary, where we focused the our Going Deeper module in primary on trees and woodland, which are kind of rarely taught about in the history curriculum. So, so I think you're right that we need both starting points that are where teachers are in terms of familiarity of content, but also to providing examples that can take us into the future and into kind of uh, areas that aren't generally taught.
So I guess to sort of finish, what kind of advice or recommendations would you give maybe teachers or schools who are looking to engage with this? What would be a good first step, or how can they kind of continue on their journey?
Mm. I mean, I think, dive into the modules is is the first thing I would say. Go and have a look, see what you think. I mean, they are designs. I think Michael said earlier in this interview, I think, teachers can just engage with them on their own if they want to. And they can engage them anywhere. They can do it all in one go. They can kind of come back and, do it in chunks. So that's very much available. But we also really like the idea, and we encourage teachers to think about doing these jointly with other colleagues in a room, in a department meeting or a year group meeting, or as part of an inset day. So we've kind of deliberately designed these. So, for example, it says think/discuss. If you're on your own, then think about it. If you're with colleagues, discuss it. And we really like that idea of people actually doing this in a collaborative way. I mean, the dream, Paul, this is the dream.
Yeah.
When we've got our full suite of subject modules, of our where to start modules by September, is that, over time, schools will start to see this as a really powerful whole school resource that they can integrate into their professional development programs. I mean, imagine an inset day where you introduced the whole area of climate change, nature and sustainability education, and then sent people off to engage in some of these modules and, maybe to look at some of your materials and just kind of have an explore what's out there and do a module, and then all come back together and see where that takes you and
Mm.
see what kind of collaborations might come out of that, either within subjects and year groups or even beyond. I think that's when you start to get some really exciting possibilities in schools. So that's the longer term vision.
Yeah, no, that sounds exciting. I like that idea that there's a scale of sort of engagement with this, and that whole school. I can really picture that and imagine that. Um,
I think
yeah,
it's worth saying that at the moment we're planning kind of what we're calling now a fourth type module, which is an introductory module that's intended for exactly that purpose. At the moment, it's relatively few schools who are taking this on across the whole curriculum. It's happening kind of organically through individual teachers, individual departments. Sometimes in secondary schools, for example, departments working together. It's kind of growing organically from the bottom up, as it were. But as Alison said, the dream would be for it to be happening whole school. And so we're working on some introductory modules to help schools with that process at the moment.
we often picture it as a sort of uptake curve of the kind of the first engagers, and what we want to get is the mainstream. And there's that sense that a lot of the teachers we're engaging with that they get this because there's another aspect of their life where this is connected, and therefore they then bring it into their teaching. But I think one of the exciting things also with this is that it helps. with that missing link of so many teachers get introduced to this. There's some sort of broader engagement around the climate nature crisis. I think that at the moment we're doing this national emergency briefing for school teachers, and that does the big picture piece. But what this does so well is linking it directly with their subject area and their kind of everyday practice, which I think a lot of teachers, there's an element of a kind of quite a big leap or a gap in that space, and this helps to bridge that.
Yeah, hopefully, and hopefully makes it seem manageable for teachers who I know don't have huge amounts of time. But we're engaging with teachers all the time who are just amazing. I mean, just incredibly committed and passionate. And we're deeply grateful to those teachers, and lots of them will be watching this, I imagine, who are kind of pioneers in their schools. And the next challenge is how do we go beyond that, as you say, and actually get this being kind of discussed and thought about across a whole school and bring more teachers into the fold, as it were.
This is a sort of bonus question, but is there also a chance to talk a bit about the curriculum and assessment review and where you think that might help or hinder some of this, and also maybe a little bit around timeframes that, when is it that schools should be thinking about this? When is it that the milestones of that?
Mm. Shall I kick off, Michael, and then you
Yeah,
can
do.
yeah.
That's good.
It's a good question. So, I mean, broadly speaking, we were kind of pleased with the curriculum assessment review in some ways. Obviously, we were delighted that in the final report, climate change was acknowledged as a challenge of our time, I think, or something like that. And we know that it's going to feature more heavily in science and geography and citizenship and design and technology, and that's great. So we're really looking forward to seeing what happens in those four subject areas. I was a bit sad we didn't just have that line, just the line that says, but this is a whole curriculum issue. But I think so. I'm not sure. I mean, I'm hoping that there will be a kind of cross-curricular dimension in the new curriculum, which is around sustainability, and that therefore, all subjects do feel it's legitimate in curriculum terms, in national curriculum terms, to be focusing on these issues. So, I mean, broadly speaking, I think it will help. I don't think it's going to be a hindrance. I think it's going to be a help. But I think we're just waiting to see, well, how is it going to play out in English and mathematics and history and art and music, and how is it going to play out in those subjects? And if there isn't a huge amount in the new national curriculum, hey, let's not let that hold us back. Let's keep pushing for this. I mean, I don't want to kind of go on with too many examples, but honestly, the music modules we're producing at the moment blow me away in the creativity and just the kind of wonderment of them. Every music teacher should be doing something around the environment, even if it doesn't say so in the national curriculum. Yeah. And, Becky Francis, who led the review, was very clear about this. The national curriculum sets out the minimum that should be taught. It in no way should define the sum total of what is taught. So we really, see that as permission to keep going.
Absolutely. I think it's worth saying that the time to start is now. There is no time to lose in this, so we can't wait for the curriculum review. But within our programme, we have a capacity to kind of revise the modules. So as we move through time and as we see what emerges in the new curriculum, we will be revising the modules to align them and to enhance what's already there. But we're very excited about what's there at the moment. And of course, the new national curriculum, whatever form it takes, will never provide inspiring examples of interdisciplinary work. And we're very excited, by the way, about our new oceans module, which will be available at the end of this academic year, which for primary, so our second kind of making connections module, and that will be combining a focus on science when looking at oceans, focus on English, a focus on art, and possibly music as well. So we're very excited about that one. But so all this is going on at the same time as a curriculum review. It will support the curriculum review. It will take us beyond whatever emerges in the new national curriculum, as Alison said.
Well, thank you so much, Michael. I think that's a perfect thing to end on there. That sense that the time is now, regardless or in spite of what else is going on, there's this moral imperative and we know what we can and kind of should do. So thank you so much. And thank you so much for sharing all of this work. And we'll make sure that we include it in the description and people are encouraged to go and access this. So thank you.
Thanks for the
Thanks, Paul. It's been a
opportunity,
pleasure.
Paul.
Thank you.
Thanks.